They call them big box PC games because the box is, well, pretty big. And inside these boxes, like this one for LucasArts' brilliant adventure game Secret of Monkey Island, is all kinds of amazing physical artifacts that you will not get if you, say, download this game off of Steam today. These items told you a lot about how these games work, how they could be very different depending on what kind of a computer you had, or what these companies were doing to try to stop piracy. Opening up this box is like taking a history lesson about what games were like back in 1990. And that's exactly what we're going to do today. Hi, I'm Chris Kohler, and welcome to Complete in Box, a series where, you guessed it, we look at old video games through the lens of the items that actually came packed inside the box and find out how those items impacted our gameplay experience. Today we have a special guest. It's my old friend Frank Cifaldi.
Hi, how's it going?
Frank, you're a game developer, you're a historian, and you are also the director of the Video Game History Foundation.
That's true, yes I am. So the Video Game History Foundation is a nonprofit that I founded last year. And what we're focused on is making sure that historians and researchers have access to the material that they would need to help them tell the story of video games. And so if we can provide things like magazine articles, like the original ephemeral material that came with a game, for example, we can better understand the game itself and tell much more interesting stories that we can just by looking at Wikipedia or whatever.
So what are we looking at today, Frank?
Today, Chris, we're looking at The Secret of Monkey Island. In fact, two different versions of the game. I brought the original EGA release, which we'll get into it a little bit later, and you brought the later VGA version.
What you have is the original version of Monkey Island.
Right, so when the Secret of Monkey Island was first released in 1990, it was in what we call the EGA format, which was even by then kind of a dated computer format where you can only display 16 colors on the screen at a time.
And that was a big deal because, you know, we were working on CGA prior to that. We could only display 4 colors.
Right. And then they upgraded to 16, also terrible, but not quite as bad colors, and that was EGA.
So in the collector community, they call these big box PC games. Why were the boxes so big?
Oh, they had to stuff a lot of things in there. Yes. I mean, primarily the discs themselves.
Right.
Because, you know, I think this comes on like 6 discs or something. Yeah. And, you know, you can't really fit 6 floppy disks. Or actually yours, so you have 3.5 floppies versus my 5.25. Yours are even thicker.
They're thicker. Well, what you kind of saw in the PC era was the boxes got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until one day they all got really small. What was happening was people were like, well, if this box attracts, you know, the consumer over to the shelf and makes them want to buy my game, what if that box was twice as large? Then it would be really in their face and they'd have to buy it. Now you see the sort of DVD-sized PC game boxes, that's small box PC games. But the era of the big box is very, you know, collectors like it. They display really well, they look great on your shelf. So, okay, so we go into a store, we look at this front cover, I see some pirates, I see a skull.
Beautiful painting by Steve Purcell.
Steve Purcell, who is the artist behind Sam & Max, the indie comic strip.
He was responsible actually for most of the in-game graphics of the LucasArts titles at the time, or at least the character animations.
Yeah.
What his role was on this game specifically.
Actually, Frank, looking at your box, it seems like a child has scribbled all over it with marker. I'm sorry.
That actually was an adult scribbling.
Oh, good.
That is Ron Gilbert, the director of the game, who I had sign it.
So let's say we're really intrigued by the front of this box. The next step is we flip it over to the back of the box. You were pointing out something about the back of this box that I didn't even realize.
The first really interesting thing to note is this screenshot right here.
Yeah.
Of the dog that's in the scum bar in the game's lore. And this screen actually does not appear in the game.
Right.
There's not even any leftover art like on the disc if you go digging through the data or anything. This is a screen that got cut to save disk size.
I feel bad for people who got this box, saw that super cute dog that barks at you, and then they took it out of the game.
Well, the dog is still in the game.
The dog is still in the game.
He's just a tiny sprite.
You don't get that close up.
And then the other thing, I could be wrong, but I believe that this shot here, which claims to be the VGA version, I believe that's a mock-up of what a VGA version would look like. And I think if you actually compared that screenshot to the VGA version of the game, you might find some differences.
The Secret of Monkey Island is a comedy game. It is absolutely 100% it's supposed to be a comedy. And really that comes across here on the box because we've got this great, like, do business with quaint and humble shopkeepers, and then there's a Coke machine that says grog instead of Coke. Participate in complex and meaningful dialogues.
And then the response, the dialogue is woof woof arf.
Yeah, so already just from this box, I mean, you're really getting the sense, if you want a funny computer game, this is probably gonna be it. And it was indeed
absolutely
very funny. Eye-gouging 3D graphics. I don't know what they're going for with the 3D there.
Your sprite can walk behind things and in front of things.
This is many years before Star Fox. Like, this is not that Star Fox was the first 3D game, but it was one of the first ones people interacted with that actually used polygons. So 3D in 1990 was extremely loosely defined. Anything was 3D. The box also calls out the no typing point and click interface. This is not to say that it doesn't have any words. It actually does have plenty of words. It's point and click though, because instead of having to type in go north, open door, you click on the word go, or you click on the word open. So it basically, you build out those text-based commands, but you do it by clicking.
Yeah, I mean, remember, this is Lucasfilm games. From the beginning, they're trying to innovate, right? And the way that Ron Gilbert, the director of this game, wanted to innovate the traditional adventure game was to get rid of the text parser, the need to type things, and go completely to point and click. So, that being a bullet point on the back of the box, I would actually say is less about that innovation and more about sticking it to Sierra.
Yeah, sure.
So Sierra,
their main competitors at the time, makers of King's Quest and Leisure Suit Larry and etc. In 1990,
it was still
you had to type everything.
Parser, yeah.
Well, Frank, I think that we've learned all we can from examining the front and the back of this box.
All right, I'll see you later.
No, Frank, you have to stay here because it's time to go inside the box. Okay. We've got our boxes open. The first thing I'm noticing is that these discs are significantly larger than mine.
Are?
Yes.
So I have, again, the 5 1/4 version. You have the 3 1/2
The
version.
3 1/2 version. I don't know about you, Frank, but I'm confused. EGA, VGA, 5 1/4, 3 1/2. What if you were to go to the store, buy a computer game and bring it home and oops, it doesn't work with your computer because the discs are wrong, you don't have the proper color adapter, or whatever. They don't want you to bring the game back to the store. The last thing they want is for you to return the game to the store. So one of the first things you'll find in these boxes is this, and we each actually have one. The 3.5 or 5.25 diskette trade-in offer.
When this version came out, the EGA version was the only version of the game to exist. The VGA version was coming later.
Yep.
And so if you had an EGA computer, but you had a 3 1/2-inch drive, you could send in this card and swap it.
So Frank, we're talking a lot right now about the VGA version versus the EGA version. We already know that one has 16 colors and one has 256 colors.
Right.
But that's really not the only difference, right?
Right. I mean, that's the primary difference.
Sure.
But the reason that it's important is because the 16-color version of The Secret of Monkey Island was the one that was actually created by the creators of The Secret of Monkey Island.
Right.
So, the Mark Ferrari backgrounds, the Ron Gilbert design, all that, the character animation by Steve Purcell, all of that was done for this version of the game.
Right.
The VGA version, it looks pretty. It's become the canonical version of the game, but it is what I would consider a remake. And so, that's, part of why it was important to me to have the original version, because this game is so meaningful to me that I want, the original cut, not the studio messed with it version of the movie. I want the original cut.
Right. The PS2 Shadow of the Colossus versus the PlayStation 4 Shadow of the Colossus, if you will. So we've got a reference card. This is very important for computer games because there's so many keyboard commands and you really want them all in one easy to check reference card. Next is the instruction manual. Ta-da! The same thing as the front of the box, but in black and white. So Frank, I actually have something in my box that is not in your box.
Good for
How
you.
exciting. It is the complete Secret of Monkey Island hint book. I think that sometimes they actually would take the hint books for the game, package them in with the game, and sell that as a bonus.
Right, that would be like a later release, probably ordered directly from Lucasfilm Games.
Right. We've now gotten to basically the best part of the Monkey Island box. We were saving the best stuff for last, and here it is. Shall we?
Together?
Yeah.
Sure.
It's the Dial-A-Pirate wheel.
What's a Dial-A-Pirate wheel, Chris?
Well, what isn't a Dial-A-Pirate wheel? You may notice that these games are on floppy disks. You may notice that people had floppy disk drives, multiple floppy disk drives on their computers, and that it was trivial to simply copy the game off of these disks, copy it onto some blank disks, which you could purchase at the store, and give it to your friends. And by God, that's what we did. All the time. And to try to stop people from doing this, they came up with all kinds of different copy protection solutions that they'd include inside the box. And so you can't start a game of Monkey Island without the Dial-A-Pirate wheel.
Okay, so I'll quiz you here. So top of the face is a monkey.
Oh, okay.
Got him. Bottom of the face is a skull.
Got it.
And the game would ask you, what year was this pirate hung in Tortuga?
1601.
Correct, you can play the game.
Yes. And this is nice color printing on cardstock. It's 2 pieces of cardstock. It's die cut. It's stamped together. This probably cost them a not insignificant amount of money to put in this box, but it shows you why it was so important that they had it in there, because otherwise you could literally just copy this game and give it out, and there was no check on that whatsoever. Dial-A-Pirate wheel.
And again, phenomenal illustrations, I would say, on here by Steve Purcell.
All right. We're down to the last item in the box, and it is large.
It's the largest thing in here.
It's big.
Okay.
It's large. How could it possibly be so big? The Adventurer. It is printed on like a broadsheet newspaper, newsprint, and it's large. The first thing in here is The Secret of Creating Monkey Island, an interview with Ron Gilbert.
With original art that might have been created as concept art or might have been drawn just for this to sort of expand the world.
And you also noticed, I mean, there were some cool limited edition goods in here, right?
So yeah, they had full color posters for $5. These are worth easily like 200 now, some of these.
Right. Leather jackets?
Yes.
Leather flight jackets inspired by the World War II games that Lucas did.
There is a running joke in the Monkey Island series based on them selling these leather jackets.
Oh, really?
Which is when I think you're knocking on the door, someone asks why you're there, and you can say, "I'm selling these fine leather jackets." And that is a reference to the leather jackets that they probably had a bunch of in stock that no one was buying.
Yep. This sort of stuff, these sort of catalogs, this is really important to your work at the Video Game History Foundation.
Sure. I mean, like you pointed out, there's an article in here about making Monkey Island, an interview with Ron Gilbert. It's probably not a very hard-hitting interview with their own employee, but to sort of contextualize and understand why this game exists, why decisions were made, that's the kind of material that we rely on and collect for researchers to come access. I mean, one of my favorite parts of this game is just the dialogue itself just feels very loose and weird and sort of, almost like sketch comedy in its writing, sort of improv even.
It's borne out in all of these things.
Right, I don't think that's a coincidence, and you know what I mean? And I think that if you understand, if you have this material in front of you, you understand, that's all on purpose, that this game is a comedy game and that's what they're going for.
Right. So there we have it. There is what makes up a complete in-box copy of The Secret of Monkey Island. And it is exhaustively complete, as far as we know.
As far as we know.
Yeah, exactly. We're going to be doing this with a lot of different games in the future. Games of all kinds of different platforms, games from all over the world. So if you like this, definitely stick around for more.